Greetings, everybody. It's Jim. What you see here on the right hand side of your screen is one of the most innovative ideas I think I've seen in space gaming. Now, the thing is, this came out in 1979, so questions must be asked. Why haven't we seen another edition of this game? How come, at the very least, we haven't seen this idea brought forth in other games? Well, there's a good reason. It's because this little universe imploded. Today, I'm going to be giving you my review of Holy War from Metagaming. All right, so now we got Holy War loaded up on the Tabletop Simulator. Somebody was nice enough to make this, and let's just go over the map real quick because it is the coolest part about the whole game. And let's just start positive, right? Because this is really innovative. It's beautiful, and it's just a shame that everything else just doesn't mesh. But anyway, this is a three-dimensional map. I kid you not, and it is awesome. You see, the thing is, when you're playing other space conquering games, basically when you move over to another spot, I mean, if they have any kind of warp lines or something like that, it's just like, okay, it takes you 2 power to get over here or 7 power to get over there. They make some abstractions just to kind of calculate that assumed three-dimensional space. But here, like here, imagine not these little hexes, just imagine these big hexes for a second. Imagine they were a space and you had this counter right here and you only wanted to move one big hex. Well, that's simple, that's simple enough. You just go to any adjacent space, right? And now imagine if it was 3 dimensions here, all these stacks are of 7, and you were the blue counter and you wanted to move one over. Well, easy enough. You can just go one here, and just all across around you adjacently. But if you add the 3 dimensions part of it and wanted to move one space, you could also move into the green sections, one up and one down in your hex, or just move over and one up or one down from there, and so on and so on. And as you can see, bam, you got 3 dimensional space. The problem is in most games, you have to play on a 2 dimensional board like this, and you can't play with all those, stacks like that. That would be way too confusing and just way too long. So what does Holy War do? This is where the little hexes come in. These are actually the levels. And that is cool. All right. So basically, all these are separated. The top of the stack is here. The bottom of the stack is in the middle. Huh. So you got the whole thing. So, basically, if this guy wanted to move one over, he just goes straight over to this hex. He just finds the exact same spot, and there he is. If he wanted to move one up or one down, as you can see the green here, it's the same thing. He moves over one and can move one up or one down. That is ingenious. That is like it just goes through the whole motion of 3 dimensional space, and that's really freaking cool. And next we have warp lines, and the warp lines are the red lines, which looks like they were written by somebody who stole their English teacher's red pen. It does make it look like it's a playtest set. But basically, you can go from like here, this counter in Oltal can actually take a warp line, just follow it, and bam, you can stop there. Or on your turn, you can just keep on going and just keep on following it until you can't go anymore. And that's how warp lines work. And it's simple enough. Okay, now when counters move in the game, they're actually face down. There's a fog of war here, which is kind of cool. And if you've ever played a Columbia block war game where they have the blocks and it's like Stratego on steroids. You can't see what your opponent has, but you can see what you've got. That's actually a pretty cool concept in any kind of wargaming. So I'm glad they brought that here. Another cool thing is they actually use force counters. So instead of having because these are really thin pieces of paper for the counters. So you have a whole stack. It gets all kind of messy, and one good breath can throw them all away. So it's good that they have force task force that can represent an entire stack of ships. All right. So what happens also is, like I mentioned before, in general, these move one a turn, or you can just go to another quadrant in the same level, one a turn. But the thing is, you can actually go more than one if you want to. What you do is you engage the warp drive, and of course, all kinds of crazy things can happen. You roll a d6 for every ship, and depending on how far extra they go, and they can become dispersed. And if that ship gets dispersed, that means your opponent takes the ship, puts it anywhere in the universe that they wish. Right, so pretty much out of play. So interesting, another chaos factor. And you might be asking yourself, well, who would ever want to go warp 5 or warp 6? Well, the game's only 7 turns long, so you want to get to that final battle with all the ships that you can. So it will happen. So, how does battle work? All right, so let's go over that. All right, now combat gets really wild, and it almost seems like a turkey shoot, and sometimes just really lopsided. But it's interesting how they get there. So let's go over this. The first thing that happens when two fleets meet is we actually separate them into groups of four. Okay, so and they're called flights. That's a flight. That's a flight, and the remainder is also a flight. And of course, the opponent does the exact same thing. Now, the next thing we do is we roll to see basically what weapons are going to be used. Is it going to be, like it says on the bottom of the counter here, is it going to be long range, medium range, or the last number, short range psychic weapons? Okay. For the purposes here, what we do is we roll the die, and on a 1 or 2 it's long, 3 or 4 it's medium, 5 or 6 it's psychic. For the sake and purposes of this, we're just going to say it's going to be long range right now, and we're going to take this flight. And then we're going to commit this flight, and these guys are going to do battle. Now, these guys have a total of long range of 18. These guys have a total long range of 17. This does not, however, work on a ratio chart. That would normally be 1-to-1 in wargaming terms. But it works on a differential chart. So these guys actually get a better column because they won by 1, as we can see right over here. All right. And of course, if these guys are going to roll on this one, and of course, if they're at +1, that means they're at the opposite team's on -1, and they roll on this one. And you notice right away, even -1 to -3, they're at a significant disadvantage. Okay. Now, the combat results happen for both sides, regardless if one gets destroyed or not. And that is an interesting thing here also. The results rolled affect everybody in the combat on the opposite side. It's not an individual ship. All right, so let's roll for the white counter player. Rolls a 5 on this and is destroyed. They totally wipe the floor with these guys. Bam, gone. All of them. So they do get their last licks in, but they rolled a 2. And of course, on this terrible chart here, it's no effect. Now, what happens? So the game keeps going, though. So we roll to see what gets taken care of now. Now it's going to be psychic weapons, and this side's already committed, but they can bring more into play. And what they'll do is they'll bring in these guys, and this will bring in these guys. So now it's really, as you can see, this turns the whole thing completely lopsided pretty much. Let's see what we got here. 0 there, 4, 5, 9, 11, 13, 20 against 14, 17, 20 against 20. That's amazing. That actually turned out okay for the other player. Let's see what happens. White player goes 4, and that's going to be an LW result. So basically, all these ships now means, come on, there we go, means that their long range weaponry is dead. Okay, gone. They don't. If we roll 1 or 2 for long range next turn, they get none of their points. It affects everybody in that stat in that combat. So let's roll for them now. Let's for a red player, and they get a 4, so it's LW for them as well. So it's going to be an interesting next turn. So now next turn, these guys come up, and they do have LW weaponry, and these guys have LW weaponry. Let's see if it matters. 3. It's going to be medium range, which everybody is okay on. Now the thing is, if you get 3 of these weapons can show up again. So otherwise you can get 2 LW results. Does it mean anything? No, because your long range weaponry is still dead. But if you get 3 of those results, your ships are all dead. All right. So interesting enough. So now we get to count all the medium range. So we got 8, 11, 15, 17, 21, 23, 25, 28, 35 against 7, 9, 11, 15, 16. So we got 35 against 17. So that's a definite. We don't even have to. It's 10 and up. This is going to be bad for that player. So it's pretty much over. 4 destroyed. All of them. Just forget it. They are destroyed. And now they still get their last shot. And it's a 3. Of course, that's right here. They were hoping for a dispersal. Which, of course, as we said, you pick all the ships and you just scatter them all over the place. So that is how lopsided these battles can be. It is insane, okay? And they actually started off pretty evenly, but just the way the results go. Now, this could have gone either way, but it is just chaos. Now, all these ships do have special abilities to a point. Are they that much that they can affect things? No. I mean, they affect little things like it might have affected that battle, because of the way it started. But for the most part, this is just a turkey shoot. It is anything can happen. I don't think there's a strategy to you just get push all your ships together and go. So don't know about it. It's like I said, it's just for fun. But definitely chaos. Now, this next part's important because this is where we start to mesh between the good and the bad. Okay. It starts out being pretty good because here's where it belongs in the preface of the story. I get where they're going at with it. But later on, it becomes just dreadfully terrible, bad implementation. So let me read these two paragraphs, kind of fun. So follow along if you dare, and you get an idea of what I'm talking about. Here we go. Lacking lungs, tongue, or mouth, properly he had no consonantal name. However, a self referential symbol set, the segments of which were also used to label amino acids, yields the transliteration Amtic, one both fair and indicative of the being's logical capacity. Data from a drifting subsection shows he created the Pyger field, but its specifications were lost in Amtic's regrettably destroyed lead node. The Pyger was an artificial and selective discontinuity field with serial capability, allowing segmental data flow through a phasing or mobile edge with the all or nothing property of the X quantum jump. Now, if Lynn Willis, the creator of this game, was here right now, I'd have one thing to ask him.
What you talking about, Willis?
That would be about it, because this whole thing's about technobabble here, and he goes on saying things like that. I have no idea if it's rooted in reality or any kind of theory whatsoever. It's just insane. But basically, the idea is Amtic, some being, created this pocket universe as an experiment. It's only 30 light years wide. And before he knew it, life had established itself on one of the planets, and all of a sudden, there were civilizations all over the place. And then something really wild happened. Not only could he not turn off the experiment because, he would be condemning billions of people to die, they found his sensor nodes in Dar-Ray and the planet or the system Dar-Pesh. His system nodes, they actually sensor nodes that actually transmit information to him, so they know of his existence now. And that's what these two factions are fighting over. Like the Holy Guard, I believe, and the Sun Throwers. All right, the Sun Throwers are trying to shut the universe down to communication with the gods, so they can be independent, and the other ones are actually trying to communicate with them. I think that's it anyway. It's easy to get confused because this is the problem with the game. Now, as I said, this was fine in the preface. Okay, this is where it belonged, and they were trying to set a tone, which they succeeded at. I mean, had that written. Lynn Willis had that written so much that I swear it's 1979. I got the idea that he was high on LSD and was drawing concentric circles all around the walls of his apartment. I mean, just wild stuff. The problem is it doesn't stay contained there. They insist on putting it everywhere else, scattered amongst the book. You're trying to read the rules, and then they have this gobbledygook technobabble. It just throws you off course, especially when you have to leaf back and forth to kind of remember some of the rules. The problem with the rules are another thing. Okay, they spend so much time, and it's written in that old time wargamer lawyerese, where they spend so much time talking about details about little things that should be obvious to anybody playing the game, but yet they spend so much time doing that they're missing other parts that are like obviously important, like whose forces are whose. You get a sheet of counters that's red and white. It's like, whose side is whose? It doesn't even say. And then there's another thing about the sun throwers. They throw a literal sun at the sensor duct systems. That's their goal, is to throw a sun in there and blow it up. So it's pretty wild right there. But they never say where the suns are at in the game. They're moved by these things called pressure ships. Am I to assume that they start with one? Do they have to go fetch them? If they are already there with them all the time, then I would think that they don't even need a counter. But yet there's a counter. So no other ship can move them except for the pressure ships. But anyway, it was very frustrating. And this game was plagued with mistakes that were no small consequence. I mean, here we have an example here about trying to teach the 3D map, the most important cool thing in the game, and it was wrong, actually. If it wasn't for that diagram, I don't know if I would have ever gotten it right. The next one is, here's a list of ships here, and there's a ship called the Field Generator, which used to have a purpose in the game because they had a tactical display that they would make the ships go onto, but they scratched it for another combat system instead. But the ship stayed. I can only imagine they already had printed the counters. But the thing is, it's an expensive ship at 9, and the power levels of the ship are just not worth that whatsoever. So there was no point in ever buying that ship unless you ran out of counters or something. And the biggest how do you do is this one right here. On the bottom are the ship's power levels depending on the range. So if you're playing launched weapons, it's the first one, energy weapons and psychic weapons. Well, they had energy and psychic weapons switched. And one of the races definitely relies more on psychic ability. So that was absolutely, it just was a complete mess. Now, past the frustration, it's easy to get the idea of what Holy War is all about. It's a chaos game. It's not meant to be taken too seriously. I mean, after all, one of the part of the game is after 7 turns, if the Holy Band actually wins by keeping the sun throwers away from throwing suns into the center grids, if they do that for 7 turns, they can choose to extend the game and go for a major victory by getting 2 of their ships in the sensor ducts, all the same while keeping the sun throwers away from completing their initial mission. But every turn, there's an extra expanded chance that the universe god Amtic will just get bored, turn off the entire universe, and just go to bed. So you can't take it too seriously. But the thing is chaos, much as this is a chaos game, the chaos unfortunately hits before the counters ever hit the map. It's just a terrible rulebook. It's very frustrating. And once you get through that, maybe you can have some fun with it, but you got to teach somebody how to play. You can't expect them to read the rules and feel any love for it. You just can't. You're going to have some dedication, play it a few times, and maybe you'll get some enjoyment out of it. But anyway, that's my review of Holy War, and I'll see you next video.